SSRIs can alter judgment, aggression, and impulse control across all ages. When those changes lead to homicide or suicide, courts treat the outcome as criminal intent, not a foreseeable drug effect. The result is wrongful conviction, not just justice. We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and Therapist Jenn, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Before we set the conversation on fire, like, subscribe, ring that bell. If this show has ever put words to something you felt but couldn't explain, supporting it matters.
And for those of you out there who are thinking about going off of your psychiatric medications, send Dr. Teralyn and I an email at thegaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. Not only are we podcast hosts and therapists, but we are deprescribers, and we can help you get off psychiatric medication safely for the brain and for the body. I am extremely excited to announce our guest today. We have Ben Bathen. Benjamin was a technical artist and senior technical artist in the video game industry on projects like Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean Online and Rock Band 2, the Beatles Rock Band 3 from Harmonix Music Systems. He did that from 2004 to 2008. During that time, 2004 to 2008 is when he consulted with a therapist. Let me fix that.
We're doing great, Jen, today. We are doing so good today.
Listen, I got this. Here's the intriguing part, everybody. From 2004 to 2008, he consulted with a therapist who started him on the SSRI, the antidepressant Prozac, as well as Lexapro. In 2017, Ben developed serotonin toxicity, akathisia, and tardive dyskinesia from the medication. The therapist who started him on the medication then filed criminal charges against Ben from 2,600 miles away for calling her confidential emergency phone number in a psychotic state, and had him convicted of 3 counts of PC-422. We will talk about that, which is criminal threats. He was sentenced to 2 years in the California State Penitentiary and served 10.5 months at the Chino, California Institution for Men and the Sierra Conservation Center. As an FYI, everyone, it is illegal for a therapist to treat a patient with a medication. So we're going to talk about that today. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate that.
I botched your bio a bit. Sorry about that.
That's like, if you knew everything that was in my bio, that was actually quite good.
All right.
I'm like an ex-con that like got thrown in prison by his therapist. So that really made me sound like a lot better.
Okay.
We got to talk about this because as therapists, okay, and interestingly enough, therapists who were prison therapists for many, many years, Ben, I need you to explain to our audience and to Dr. Terry and I how it is that a therapist prescribed you psychiatric medication. So can you start your story here and explain to us how this even happened?
So I was in a high-stress career field. I was an animator for the video game industry. It's, difficult to get funding. There are lots of layoffs. It's a volatile industry. And I went to go talk to a therapist. And you guys are both therapists, so like in the first session, it's all sort of like compliance and documentation stuff. You have to get people to sign informed consent forms, things like that. As early as the second session, she started saying things to the effect of, I really want you to go on this medication. It's my moral and ethical obligation to make sure you're taking this medication. This is the right medication for you. And I grew up on military bases, so it seemed like sort of off to me. I really didn't like that idea, and initially I declined. How she did it was, I was 26. She sat me down in her office. She pulled out a pad of paper. She wrote fluoxetine. I believe it was 120 milligrams. She then handed it to me and said, "It's my moral and ethical obligation to make sure you're taking this medication." And then provided me with instructions as to where to go and what to say in order to get the licensed psychiatrist to prescribe it. So
that's what happened. That's interesting.
But the thing is that for all 4 years, she was the one dictating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take this note with the specific name of the medication and the dosage to this guy, show it to him and say this.
They're in cahoots. Are these two people as a partnership working in cahoots?
No, I mean, if you walk into any doctor's office right now, you could walk down to your local general practitioner and say, "I feel bummed out," and they'll prescribe fluoxetine, which is
True.
That's
Hold
true.
more.
on. Hold on. I want to say this. That is true. However, as therapists, we were always taught to no one, we can't suggest a particular medication, and two, we can't suggest dosing of that medication, right? So you're correct in your statement. You can go to the doctor and say, I think I want to try some Prozac, and you'll probably get some Prozac, right? But I don't know. Jen, I've
I can't
never.
fathom this.
No,
Most
I
yeah,
think
it's
that
it's
psychiatrists, yeah,
totally it's
most
it's
totally
really
prescribers
fucked.
don't. Yeah, they don't
It's
like
really fucked.
respect. They don't respect us. And so
No,
if I had
and
a
they wouldn't
client
respect
that,
that either.
yeah, they would look at that and go, your therapist thinks that you need to take fluoxetine. Okay, she can go back in her silo. She is out of
Yes.
her scope of practice. Let's you and I talk about why you think you might need a psych med. That's why I
As a
asked if they
matter
were
of
in
fact,
cahoots.
probably if I sent a client
you
to
know,
a psychiatrist and said, tell him you need to take this med, they would probably give him something very different because I said,
Right.
tell him you take this
All right,
med.
we gotta let
Anyway,
Ben keep
sorry.
talking.
Sorry,
Okay,
Ben.
keep going, Ben. Keep going. You just keep going.
anyway, that went on for years, for all 4 years, in every single session. A good 50-60%
What?
of what we were talking about was medications and dosages, and whether or not to continue with the medication.
Wow.
I mean, granted, this was a long time ago. This was so you're talking about right at the end of 2004 to September of 2008, and at that time, there really wasn't any information about adverse side effects, right? I mean, that's
Sure.
becoming more
Mhm.
commonly known. Now, that's coming out now, probably within the last 5 to 10 years. But still, you are both very astute to notice, like, that's totally unethical and illegal on her part.
Oh, it's just like gross.
It's like way, way, way outside of the scope of her licensure. And they weren't just, there's an ongoing debate from the San Diego Superior Court all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals as to whether pulling out a piece of paper, writing the name of a medication, the dosage, and telling somebody how to get it, and then saying it's my moral and ethical obligation to make sure you're taking this medication. The California Attorney General's office does not qualify that as a prescription.
I see.
That was a written recommendation, and clearly Mr. Bathen either knew or should have known not to trust the doctor sitting right in front of him, making these comments. So she forgot to mention that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration held open hearings in 1991, twice in 2004, and once in 2006. And the content of what was testified to in those hearings has basically been withheld from the American people. So it's beyond heartbreaking. People are testifying about their dead family members.
Yep.
And those are real people. And the FDA's black box warning. The FDA black box warning was actually implemented at the same exact time. So roughly February of 2005. At that same exact time, she was starting me on the medication, but excluded the fact that in October of 2004, roughly 3 weeks before she started me on the medication, they had this huge hearing where hundreds of people testified. My wife took Prozac, shot both of our children dead, and shot herself twice in the abdomen. Or, one guy, I don't want to get into the details of it, gets pretty intense, but lots of murders, lots of suicides, particularly extremely brutal and graphic murders.
Yes.
With no apparent motive. Like, there's no reason for any of these, but they just went completely insane within a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Shaved their heads, got divorced, and murdered anybody in close proximity to them. I'm not quite certain how anybody could possibly misconstrue that as helpful. Actually, in independent drug trials and independent drug reviews, the actual rate of efficacy for all SSRIs, together is less than 3%, so less than the placebo effect.
Yes, sir. You are correct.
And so any real perceived, benefit from these drugs is likely psychosomatic, right? I mean, if you give 100 people in a room a orange prescription bottle with Tic Tacs in them and tell them, they invented mint flavored antidepressants, you would actually get a slightly better result in terms of treatment with depression without causing severe neurological damage, episodes of acute psychosis, psychomotor restlessness, rage-filled murder, and death, right? So
Yeah.
that is something that a lot of people do not know, and the reason why they do not know that is that the pharmaceutical industry is now the largest contributor to both Congress and the FDA. They contribute more money to your elected officials than all Department of Defense contractors combined. So if you can imagine the companies that are out there building nuclear aircraft carriers, Apache helicopters, all that, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, the Joint Strike Fighter, more money is actually going into Congress and lawmaking branches of the federal government from drug dealers than from DOD contractors. And that's what they are, drug dealers. Doesn't matter if they got a FDA stamp of approval or not. They're slanging dope just like the inmates back at Chino.
So you had something written on your website that I wanted to bring up because I thought it was a very profound statement. I think it applies to this. It said, once a patient starts on medication, they are no longer able to monitor their own behavior.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The patients that are on this, right, so we don't have a video of tardive dyskinesia or exactly what that is, but it's dramatically more serious than what they're displaying on commercials.
Yeah.
For drugs. They now have multi-million-dollar advertising campaigns running on television for drugs to suppress tardive dyskinesia, which
I have said this. I'm like, well, this is fascinating. If only certain antipsychotics can cause TD, why is Big Pharma pushing TD medications right now? Because we know that most medications can cause tardive dyskinesia in some way. And I thought, wow, this is the new thing. So instead of people stopping their medications, we're going to give them, a new medication that will stop the TD. And I'm like, oh.
Well, and Ben, you're right in terms of how it's being presented. For any of us out there who have ever experienced,
how it's being presented, it's hilarious.
It's like little.
There's a woman.
Something. Yep.
And she's
it's not even that. It's like a woman, like there's nicely veiled lighting, what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like somebody's grandma is like in a wheelchair and she's like, my mom had terrible tardive dyskinesia.
Yes.
But now, thanks to, I'm not going to name the name because I'm not getting sued. Who the
fuck cares? You know what? They can sue us.
It's Ostito. It was Ostito.
Yes. I knew that's what you were going to say.
You guys want to see what real tardive dyskinesia looks like? Follow the Joey Marino story.
Joey Marino. No, I knew him personally.
You did.
And that was really heartbreaking. There's like 5 crazy people that were just like posting, oh my God, like tardive dyskinesia, akathisia, everybody, don't take the brown acid, man.
Yeah. Well, so Ben, for you though, you're not wrong when you're talking about how it's being presented in these commercials. It's being presented as an involuntary movement. Somebody's hand might be twitching. Somebody at a worker is at a coffee shop and she drops the coffee cup by accident. Right. This is how it's being presented. You're right. It's marketing genius. What did you experience?
I have I've actually just recently been given an official tardive Okay, switch sides. No, I have tardive dyskinesia. So about 3 to 5 times a week, I have these like bizarre seizure-like movements. Start sweating profusely, the teeth grinding We have videos. It's not really, people don't want to watch it, to be blunt.
And Ben, this is how many years off?
8 years.
8 years off, and you still struggle with tardive dyskinesia.
Yes. So the full story is that from 2004 to 2008, my therapist was really pushing SSRI antidepressants. I mean, really aggressively. She definitely did a hard sell. Therapy ended under somewhat bizarre circumstances. She just went totally loopy. It started
She was
screaming.
also medicated, though, wasn't she? Didn't she?
Oh yeah,
she was
big
medicated
time.
as
Yeah,
well.
there's legalities about that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
You know, my post-conviction attorneys are literally going to strangle me just for appearing on the show.
They should.
Sorry.
Pat Ford is going to spontaneously combust.
Let's have them
Pat,
come on.
Get on the show.
I know. I would.
Please.
Yes, Pat Ford.
Anyways.
I don't want to get ahead of myself in the story, but Pat Ford is a very sort of refined, dignified post-conviction attorney who litigated and won a case in the United States Supreme Court. So my therapist has me, in 2017, I developed akathisia. I did not recognize, no one on the drugs can recognize the symptoms in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because the medication, there is an effect that the medication simply decreases activity in the frontal lobe. And people think that they're going about their business on a normal day, except they've just hacked their 2 5-year-old twin daughters to death and called 911 and explained it to the police, right? So 0 of the patients were able to recognize that their behavior had been altered. When I first started developing TD, apparently it just scared the crap out of everybody in my office. Have you ever had like a booger in your nose or something that nobody told you about? You know, there was like a good 6 months there where I was like sitting there going like, involuntary faces?
Yes.
What involuntary? Like, I'm not twitching.
Nobody tells you. Mm-hmm.
And they've actually proven that scientifically. They did a survey. There was a survey by YASA, a famous scientific research paper, where they went and they surveyed all the TD patients and said, you know, do these TD movements bother you? And the response from all of them, some of whom were having like full-blown seizures, was, what involuntary movements?
Ben,
Right,
I've
so-
experienced this with clients in the prison and outside of the prison. Like, do you know that this is going on here? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you don't realize that
like
you're
what
constantly
weird face?
licking your lips because of all this stuff, like, and jutting
Actually,
your tongue out repeatedly?
So we had to go back through everything. We did all the post-conviction and litigation. I called and found my supervisor from that time period, and he wrote an affidavit about what he witnessed. And he was like, oh yeah, Ben makes these weird faces. He's always grinding his teeth and snapping his head. But that was 6 months before I got arrested, and I didn't know. If you had told me at the time, I would have said, I don't make weird faces, and you are a crazy person. I don't, right. So, absolutely not. And that's sort of the big focus on, we took a writ of habeas corpus all the way up to the Ninth Circuit. Pat was very gracious about it, but we got annihilated. The California Attorney General's office and the judiciary all the way up to the Ninth Circuit at both the state and federal level say there are no adverse side effects to selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Mr. Bathen does not, they agree with me, I do not make weird faces. There is no such thing as tardive dyskinesia. And if any of those things do exist, it's clearly Mr. Bathen's fault for not recognizing them earlier. Which is...
Ben Bathen, I want you to meet our friend Toby Watson. Have you met Mr. Watson yet? You should give Toby a call. Yep.
Who is Toby Watson? Is he an attorney?
No, he's a psychologist who testifies on cases like yours.
Yeah, no, well, I've met many people that you probably know. Peter Bregan
Oh, yeah.
is he's older now, and he's not really taking cases. He's mostly focused on the COVID vaccine, but he testified in front of Congress on this specific subject.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So,
Peter Gachi is another leading figure. He's in Copenhagen, Denmark, and he ran his own drug regulatory agency, and he's a PhD. This is somebody who's academically clearly in the top 1% of smart people on the planet. And so I corresponded with them quite a bit. David Healy is also a big sort of proponent of doing further testing and issuing stronger warnings. He runs antidepressantrisks.org.
yes, he does.
And so we have support groups available for patients who have been treated with these medications. And we also have just information on what they're going through. The list of side effects is totally bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
We call them divorce pills. So, like, if the doctors prescribe that, if you are married or in a relationship and the doctors prescribe that, you are getting divorced. Doesn't matter how great your relationship was or how much you loved each other before.
It's very, very likely. Yes.
Divorce
very
is
likely.
like almost guaranteed. And then there's a whole bunch of other, the weird sex stuff I think is just absolutely disturbing.
Ben, you were talking about the inability to recognize like the symptomology that was happening with you, the world around you could see it. Okay. Could you explain to our listeners, in your bio, you had said that you were in a state of psychosis, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know at that point if you were recognizing this was happening, but it was enough. Okay. So you called you called your therapist's emergency, like confidential line.
So
can you tell us what happened?
So when you start on therapy, you guys were therapists, so there's like informed consent forms that you have to sign about, being a mandated therapists have certain things that they are required to report.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So somebody comes in and says, they're a child molester or they're going to commit a murder or something, the therapists are required to report it. They then tell you, this is the confidential phone number. You can call this confidential phone number anytime, day or night. If anything happens, call this number, right? But they don't tell you what's going to happen. Then they get you addicted to a hallucinogenic stimulant that tends to make people chop their own body parts off and murder anybody in close proximity to them without telling the patients, right? It's not in the medication guide. We actually have the exact moment at the FDA hearings where the panel of administrators takes a vote and decides not to include a warning about violence towards others at all age groups. Instead, they issued a limited warning in 2004.
Well, this is what I want people to know real quickly. I'm about ready to burst. Is that those the inserts and things like that are negotiated. The things that are in there are it's like a negotiation, a mediated response to these things. So it's literally a committee deciding what we're going to put in and why and when, and the negotiation ensues. So that's not even a full list, is what I'm saying.
You got to get the drug sheet. You have to actually get the drug sheet.
Even the drug sheet. That's the same thing, though, Jen. It's the same thing. That drug sheet.
No, but it goes much more into detail. It's still negotiated.
That's still negotiated. Yes.
Your actual drug sheet is going to give you a lot more information. But besides that, so do you recall calling this emergency line? Do you remember? Did you?
I don't remember doing what I went to prison for. I really don't.
What were you told us? What were you told you went to prison for, Ben, that you don't remember? You put some PC 422 threats in here. Can you tell people what it was?
No, well, I was convicted of PC 422 criminal threats, right? Which is like a long run-on sentence, but the law that I was convicted of simply doesn't make any sense because, one, it has to be willfully, right?
Yep.
I don't have the exact sentence in front of me, but it's like long. accumulated like 5 sentences into this one run-on thing. The premise of it is that it has to be immediate and present the immediate prospect of execution of the threat.
Right.
So, like a month after this happens, I'm wandering around in Northern Virginia, having a hard time trying to find my car. When I receive a phone call from the Springfield police station and they say, can you come over and talk to us? So I promptly call them back and say, gee whiz, guys, yeah, I can. And then drove over to the Springfield, Virginia police station and said, I'm here to see Detective LeVay. And then, like, the SWAT team came in running out, screaming, we know it's you.
What?
This is a month after you make this phone call.
About a month and a half. So the last phone call, I believe, was July 5th, 2017. Then I was notified to August 10th of 2017. So then
There's
police officers and detectives
risk.
are like, they're screaming in my face. To which I replied, like, dude, I'm not in California. I'm in Virginia. Right. And then hijinks and shenanigans ensued. We went through a full litigation process. It took about a year for them to actually convict and sentence me. I was sentenced to 2 years in the California State Penitentiary. The audio recordings of this are extreme. I mean, when they say acute psychosis, they mean it. My point being, I followed the federal mandated guideline.
Yes.
And in terms of what the law says, those are my recordings. I have a privilege. I chose not to waive that privilege. And they can't listen to the audio recordings that they do not like, It is extreme. I mean, there's a lot of, it's very threatening. But I think therapists and psychologists, particularly if they are claiming that they should be allowed to discuss these medications in a collegial manner or make, non-prescription notes that specify medications and dosages, they're going to have to accept the fact that people are not going to call the confidential emergency phone number and say nice things over the phone while overdosing on a hallucinogenic that tends to make people rape dead, dismembered bodies. That's a real report that came back from the FDA. So we did a Freedom of Information Act request. There was a man named Andrew Thibault. You may know him. He did a FOIA lawsuit to the FDA that caused the release of 800 detailed narrative reports shortly after I went to prison, and they're beyond brutal. So it's like male patient told a female acquaintance that he was thinking about suicide. She reported it to someone and had him, taken into state custody. They promptly pumped him full of SSRI antidepressants and let him go. He then lured the female acquaintance over to his apartment, beat her, killed her, dismembered the body, raped the dead body after he dismembered it, and committed suicide by firearm. There's reports from France. The French Pharmacovigilance Agency, which is basically their equivalent of the FDA, sent a whole wad of reports from France over here before these incidents occurred. A male patient was issued Lexapro. He then murdered all of his children and committed suicide by firearm. The French thought that was so significant that they attempted to warn other drug regulatory agencies, but they will not take the drugs off the market, which is what they really need to do, or as a lesser thing, put a real warning on there.
Well, a warning that isn't dismissed.
Yes.
Well,
the FDA warning is totally inept. I mean, it's just not.
I don't know how even just the black box warning that's on these things. I don't know how any buddy under the age of 30, but I realize it's everybody this can happen to, but the warning is specific to these age groups. I don't know how anyone can even be prescribed these things, but yet they jump right over it. I mean, I don't get this part of prescribers being
That
able to
does
do
not make
that.
sense to me either. From what I understand, there are other medications, right? Like you could issue MAOIs, monoamine oxidase inhibitors,
Mhm.
but those also have complications. So you have to eat a
Mhm.
special diet. They can cause serotonin toxicity.
Mhm. Well, you
And
can't get
so,
something for nothing in any of these conversations, right? Like, that's
yeah,
basically what it is. I do have a question though before you, because we are running a little low on time. 2 questions actually. So, in a state of psychosis, you had called, but it was a month later that anything was done about this, like a
well,
month later.
initially the Chula Vista Police Department told her, this isn't actually a crime, so we're not going to investigate it because it's not immediate, right?
Yes.
She then did an end run around the police department, took the complaint directly to the district attorney's office, and they then had local law enforcement, come.
I
They didn't
see.
arrest me, but they did coerce me into what I was told is, someone's applied for a restraining order hearing. If you don't go back to California, this will show up on your security clearance investigation and you'll lose your job, right?
There we go.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, because
Which is
my
also
question was really like, in your opinion, this is gonna sound kinda weird. What would have been a better course of action to help you?
right. So there are a lot of activist groups out there. Law enforcement is like high testosterone levels, right? They do a great job. I don't have anything against law enforcement. If I were to say anything to them, it'd be more time at the library, less time at the gym, guys. Like so there are advocacy groups that want social workers to handle those kind of mental health interactions and respond to those as opposed to law enforcement, right? Law enforcement is there to like prevent people from robbing banks with machine guns. So like they're great. They're not necessarily the world's most sensitive individuals.
Mhm. So, so are you
And there is
saying
no
'cause
nice white collar prison for people who just
mm,
called the emergency phone number. I mean,
right.
you're in there with people who murdered their own parents and,
Yeah.
Nazi tattoos all over the place, which I found to be
Yeah.
beyond foul. Teralyn, you brought it up, and I just wanted to talk about it for a second. So, a lot of people believe that there is some huge white complex out there in the Washington, D.C. or Maryland area where the FDA conducts medical tests based on the drugs that pharmaceutical companies submit. And that is not the case. The FDA does not conduct drug trials, right?
Right.
The pharmaceutical companies conduct the drug trials. They submit data from the pharmaceutical company to the FDA for approval, right?
Mhm.
But what the American public doesn't know is that they are also providing funding to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So currently, up to 65% of the funding for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration originates from the pharmaceutical companies in the form of user fees, right? And then when they generate the medication guide, there's an army of attorneys at the pharmaceutical company that are putting together a proposed medication guide. And there are certain levels of like how many reports have to be received in order for that reaction to be included in the medication guide.
Mhm.
Now,
Yes.
there's the Med-RA standard, which is a coding standard intended to make it possible for drug regulatory agencies to share data. The issue is when somebody, dismembers a female acquaintance, sexually assaults the body parts, and then commits suicide, that gets aggregated using the Med-RA coding standard into the medication guide as irritability.
Yeah.
or
Yes. That's the
hostility.
category. Yeah, it follows under, right? Yeah.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
irritability, hostility, or aggression. So if you're
Aggression.
reading a medication guide, the term aggression, the FDA official definition of that is suicide, homicide, and other acts of violence.
Yes.
And then the other thing that the government has been very, very shy about talking about is that there is a definite correlation between the mass shootings and treatment with SSRI antidepressants.
Yeah.
You know, that's very controversial. People don't like that idea. It's true.
Not here. We've had multiple people on who are experts
Mhm.
in that area who talk
You know,
about
when
it.
you
So
invited
we
me
open that
on
up.
when you invited me on the show, I went back and listened to like 2 or 3 of your previous podcasts, and the very first one is a guy whose story is like identical to mine. It wasn't him, it was his father,
Father.
right?
Yeah.
Was talking in therapy, and they flagged him as being dangerous
Mhm.
and took some retiree and threw him into a mental health
Mhm.
facility, many of which are actually, slightly worse than the prisons.
Truth.
So
There's
Yeah.
truth. Mhm. When you were when you were in prison, my my burning question is, did they keep you on meds?
no, absolutely
Okay.
not. That's why I have tardive dyskinesia, right? So you are
'Cause they
handcuffed
Mhm.
and thrown in a holding cell. They don't separate anybody. I mean, you're in there. It's level 1 through 4, right? 4 being the dismembering guy, level 1 being the voicemail guy,
Mhm.
right? But you're in there with those are real live prison inmates, and they will kill you for talking to a black guy for more than 30 seconds.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, no, we had. So initially, I went to the Bailey Correctional Facility, which is a large complex on the border of Tijuana, where they basically put people and leave them indefinitely. It was totally insane. My father was a military attorney. He worked for the Army as a JAG Corps attorney, did the full 20, and then went to work for the federal government as a civilian. I have never seen anything like this in my life. I mean, there were people in there that had been in Bailey for 3 to 7 years, never saw an attorney, no hearings, didn't know they had the right to an attorney, didn't know they had the right to a trial. In prison, the number one question I got was, well, what was your deal? What did you sign for? And I said, oh, dog. I didn't actually sign for anything,
Yeah. You did.
right?
Uh-huh.
I took my case to trial, and they said, well, how did you do that? And I said, well, I just didn't do anything. I refused to say anything, and then eventually they had to give me a trial. And he said, well, they said I had to sign something. I was like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
just what they do. Aside from the SSRI antidepressant issue, the legal system in this country needs a serious update. Right. So currently, African American males make up 6% of the population. They make up 34 to 35% of the prison population. The vast majority of them signed plea bargains. They never went to trial. That's a number that I just think is unforgivable. One thing that a lot of Americans don't know is that the California penitentiary system is racially segregated, and that is enforced by the gardens and the wardens and the guards, right? So they have whites only drinking fountains. You're not allowed to go live in one dormitory because, like, for example, I couldn't live in the white dormitory because I'm part Filipino. It's unbelievably violent. If you're on the yard with somebody in protective custody, and there's no guard between you and them, you're required to kill them. And there's no separation. California doesn't separate. They don't necessarily send everyone to mental health facilities. If they have an adverse drug reaction, everybody just goes to prison.
Right.
And then currently, due to the state's commitment to mental health, people that have been convicted of violent felonies, like, for example, my bunkmate was convicted of manslaughter a long time ago. He killed somebody. He had 5 free packs of Prozac in his prison locker, and he was just like, dude, feeling bad? Take some of these. They give them to me at the dispensary. So the day that you're released from prison, you are then, ordered to go to the parole office, where a team of psychiatrists sits you down and says anything they have to say to get you to take more fluoxetine, right? Joseph Glenn who is a teaching professor at both Harvard Law School and Harvard Medical School, did a research study. What they did was they iterated through the federal adverse event reporting system and calculated how likely each class of medication was to cause violence. So Prozac is currently number 1. It is actually rated as being more likely to cause violent behavior than amphetamines, which can also be legally prescribed. But, for a lot of these people, the honest statistics are it would actually be safer to just do street drugs or illegal narcotics than it is to take the stuff that your doctor is legally prescribing, which I think is totally insane. And there is absolutely, positively no way for the vast majority of patients to know that.
Well, Ben, that's because your drug dealer is more ethical than your prescriber.
Actually, I honestly believe that some of the drug dealers I was in prison with
they know exactly
have more
the risks.
integrity.
Yes. They know the risks of that drug inside
Actually,
and out.
Bat, who is a prison inmate in the San Diego area, the reason why, if you're out there, I miss you, homie. Anyway, the reason why he's called Bat is because he has a gigantic Batman symbol tattooed across his face, only not like horizontally like the mask. I mean, that's what you would think people get. It's diagonal, right? And I asked him one time, I said, Bat, I don't want to put you on the spot, man, but like, what's up with the Batman tattoo? And he just said, you know what, Bathen, like, sometimes when you're high on crystal meth, things seem like a good idea, but really they're not. And he's stuck with this for like the rest of his life. And his name is Bat. And we're sitting there in prison, and he looks over at me. Bat basically grew up in state custody, right? So the longest that he's ever been out of prison in his entire adult life is about 6 months. And so basically they'll throw him in there on like drug charges like possession for about a year, and then they will let him out. When they let him out, they give him a JPay card which has $200 on it, and it's intended to like help you reintegrate into society. He then travels across the Mexican border, buys as much crystal meth as possible, travels back to San Diego, and sells it until they sent him back to prison. Right? But as far as knowing, right, so Bat looks over at me in prison. He goes, you know what it is, Bathen? It's the crystal meth, man. That's what it is. Every time I get out, I go straight back to it. I end up straight back in here. And I kind of tried to convince him, like, well, maybe this time when you get out, like, just don't smoke any crystal meth. And he
Seems
just said,
reasonable.
No, I don't think that would work, man. I'm sticking with this. The patients that have been issued these drugs have been seriously misled. Gaslit, just like the name of the show, is the perfect name. If you're sitting there, all the lawyers, the prosecutors keep insisting that I knew there were a bunch of hidden secret reports at the FDA of people chopping their own family members into pieces, and heinously decided to trust my doctor anyway. That simply isn't true. There is no way that any reasonable person could know how extreme the adverse side effects of those medications are.
No.
And instead, the issue that I have with the AG's office, right, Mr. Bonta, if you're listening, is that they are prosecuting the individual patients for taking the medication instead of prosecuting the CEOs of the pharmaceutical companies who knowingly brought those substances into the United States and distributed them for massive record-breaking profits. So, for example, GlaxoSmithKline, the only legal entity that was really tracking how many adverse drug events occurred, which include murder, GSK was separately tracking 44 homicides to make sure that nobody traced them back to Paxil and the product that they were selling.
Yep.
And the internal discovery shows that very clearly. Howard Solomon was the CEO of Forest Laboratories under the Obama administration. They decided to simply not do business with Forest Laboratories. The federal government cut them off. He initially brought Lexapro, which is the medication that I took, into the U.S. And immediately after, Adam Lanza shot 25-year-old 6 adults, his mother and himself, in Newtown, Connecticut. Andrew Solomon, the son of Howard Solomon, showed up at Adam Lanza's father's house and said, "I'd like to interview you for the New Yorker," and then published a big article in the New Yorker explaining that Adam was not on Lexapro on the dates of the Sandy Hook shootings, right? But
On
what
the
he did
dates. Mhm.
on the dates,
Yep.
but what he did not explain is that Adam had a documented adverse drug event similar to mine, right? He lost control of movements of his arms, and the Connecticut Medical Examiner's Office then suppressed the medical records and refused to release them.
Mhm.
So Adam did have the same genetic, anomaly that I've got. He simply could not tolerate the medication, and he was in withdrawal, which is equally
Yep.
as dangerous on the dates that he committed those shootings.
Yes.
And if
That's
you
just
look,
it. That's just it. I just have to say, like, I know there's a lot of movements for like mass shootings and doing their toxicology and all that. I'm like, you're not going to capture the people who are stopping off. They might not be in their system anymore. You're not going to capture that information because they're not on it at the time of the incident.
No.
Right?
You can't
exactly,
capture
yeah, no, and
protracted
it's
withdrawal. No.
Mhm.
people have a hard time with that because it's not. People think like you take Tylenol, 2 hours later your headache goes away, right?
Yeah.
But with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they're cumulative, and it takes about 6 months for these things to become fully effective. So when you're coming off of it, like I still have very serious and very visible side effects that there's no other explanation for.
Mhm.
8 years after coming off the medication,
Yep.
I still have seizures. And it honestly, it's beyond horrific. Adam, I'm totally convinced that the medication was related there. James Holmes is a famous case in Aurora, Colorado. I would say he definitely, the medication definitely played a causal role there. And there, in my case, we have CYP 450 DNA analysis. There is an incredibly brilliant scientific researcher who has just fought tooth and nail. Her name is Dr. Selma Eikelenboom. She's testified in multiple court cases caused by SSRIs. She conducted the CYP 450 DNA analysis on me, and it's conclusive, right? The medication did cause those incidents. Pharmacogenomics shows it. We're going to get more brain scans. I'm going to take QEEG and SPECT scans. Those are new emerging technologies that, simply would not have been available at the time of my trial.
Mhm.
What I think is really sad is that the judges and the court system are denying evidentiary hearings because they believe they have to protect the therapist that did this. She is also on the medication.
Mhm.
So by denying the evidentiary hearing, they're effectively ensuring that she will die an unbelievably disturbing, incredibly painful death as part of their plan to protect her, which
Yep.
just, I don't really get it. Columbine High School, Eric
Yep.
Harris and Dylan Klebold.
Yep.
They know for a fact that Eric Harris was under the influence of a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor on the day that him and his buddy shot up their classmates, and they know that because he attempted to enlist in the military and was rejected due to the fact that he had previously used antidepressants.
Yes.
I think there's, but bringing it up within the court system or the government is like an exercise in futility, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, you're just up against a judge who just says, you are going to respect my authority, Mr. Bathen, and they literally do not believe.
South Park reference, nice one.
Yeah, they don't believe in DNA evidence,
Yeah.
and they're judges.
Yes. Yep.
So the premise of their argument
Yes.
is that patients are fully informed, and if they take this medication, they're responsible for any completely bizarre behaviors that it causes. My point is
Even
that
though they don't know what to look for.
Well, they've deliberately concealed it and excluded it from the medication guide.
Mhm.
Look, the pharmaceutical company that's making $10 million a day just pushing dope that causes the rage-filled murder of small children, they are not going to tell the public that. I mean, they're not going to disclose that information. They spend unbelievable amounts of money trying to conceal that. And I think the thing that's heartbreaking for me is Judge Michael Emanello denied my habeas petition October 5th, 2023. On December 14th, on December 14th, 2024, Vin Nguyen was prescribed SSRI antidepressant and proceeded to shoot both of his children in the head.
Mm.
And then he murdered his wife and committed suicide by firearm. And every law enforcement official in Southern California saw those FDA reports before that happened. And they just don't care. They really don't.
So are you thinking that I feel like you feel so sad, and I could be off, because your case could prevent so many other bad things from happening in the future like this. Is that correct? A correct statement?
Yes.
If they would
Absolutely.
hear your case and your case would come.
Not specifically my case, right? Like, I'm just a little scrub. They don't care.
But your
right?
case is part
But
of the
I
bigger
think
picture.
the SSRI issue in general, when the FDA fails miserably at protecting the American public due to its financial corruption, I mean, they're being paid off. And when they do that, it's the judiciary's role to step in and say, you can't let drug dealers murder kids, right? Like, that's not how that works. And they just aren't going to do it, right? And that is because the pharmaceutical companies are legally insulated in a way that makes it much, much easier for them to simply prosecute the patients, right? And that I had no problem finding multiple patients who have serious convictions. David Crespi is currently serving 2 back-to-back life sentences for stabbing both of his twin daughters after being prescribed Prozac. And here's yet another case where it's conclusive. Modern science. At the time that occurred, they didn't have genetic testing techniques to to be able to conclusively say this was caused by the medication.
Mhm.
But David, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. Let's see, Laura Wenke. A lot of people, that one made national news just because it was so bizarre. She was in the process of getting divorced. They prescribed Lexapro. She became, totally bonkers. She started, finding herself in places that she didn't know how she got there. She then constructed a suit of armor out of bubble wrap, snuck up on her husband in the middle of the night, shot him with a taser, and repeatedly stabbed him in the neck, right? So Laura has just been denied parole again. She's already done 10 years. There is no way that she could have known that medication. What they're telling the patients, this is going to make you happy, right? Like stabbing your husband in the neck doesn't make anybody. Well, it makes some of my ex-girlfriends happy, but other than that.
But no, we get that. The thing that's supposed to help you hurts you, and that is widely unacknowledged. But we could go on with this conversation for 3 days, probably. Yes. But we do have to wrap up. Our time here is done. Ben, thank you so much for sharing not just your story, but your knowledge behind the story. I think is phenomenal. So we are so happy to have you on the show here today. If you have listened this far, make sure that you like, comment, share. Please share this episode widely, far, everywhere, and send us your Gaslit Truth at the Gaslit Truth Podcast at gmail.com. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on the show.